During the Victorian era, Anne Boleyn's resting place was opened, and it was immediately noticed that parts of her body were missing, not from decomposition, but from something far more disturbing. What held her remains was not even a coffin. It was something so humiliating that historians struggle to describe it. Henry VIII did not simply want Anne dead. He put great effort into erasing her from history, and what he did to her body after the execution reveals just how far he was willing to go. But he was not alone. By the late 1520s, Henry was no longer behaving like a typical Renaissance king. The surviving love letters he sent to Anne reveal something deeply unsettling. At that time, it was common for European kings to have mistresses. It was practically expected. One of Henry's main rivals, Francis I of France, was especially famous for his love of women. A court without women is a year without spring, and a spring without roses. Henry clearly shared this viewpoint, as he too was known for numerous affairs. But Anne broke his habits, and in a way that was way darker than most historians want to admit. Historical records do not make it clear when or how Henry first noticed Anne, but we know that several years passed between her arrival at court and his first love letters. Anne did something most women at court would never have dared to do. She could have lost everything: favor, security, or even her life. But Anne and her family likely also saw this as an opportunity. She combined moral, religious, and political reasoning and refused to become Henry's mistress. This frustrated and humiliated Henry to such a degree that it awakened terrifying tendencies in him. In Renaissance courts, it was very rare for a king's interest to be rejected outright, especially by a young woman. Henry became intensely focused on winning Anne over. He sent her unusual love letters. "I and my heart put ourselves in your hands, begging you to recommend us to your favor, and not to let absence lessen your affection to us. For it were a great pity to increase our pain, which absence alone does sufficiently." Kings never wrote like this because it was dangerous. Showing strong feelings on paper could weaken their authority and leave proof that enemies could use against them. But Anne made Henry break every rule. Historians agree that he became hopelessly obsessed with her. Yet Anne added even more fuel to the fire, something that would eventually lead to her own downfall. King's obsession with having sons in 16th century Europe was not a personal preference. There was a widespread belief that women were weaker than men and unsuited to rule. Henry was already married to Catherine of Aragon. They'd lived together for 20 years, and their main task was to produce a male heir. Many of Henry's rivals had secure heirs, which put pressure on him to produce one as well. Francis I had 3 legitimate sons. Charles V, despite suffering from health problems related to inbreeding, had 2 legitimate sons. It was extremely damaging to Henry's ego and sense of kingship that Catherine gave him only a daughter, Mary. Catherine was aging, and as time passed, the chances of producing a male heir diminished further. This devastated Henry, but Anne used that vulnerability. She made Henry believe that she could be the one to give him the son he desired, but it required something impossible. It took years of struggle against the entire world. Henry risked war with European powers. His advisors were outraged. The Pope refused. Also, Henry could divorce his wife, marry Anne, and produce a male heir. He tried to move heaven and earth for Anne, and he succeeded. In 1533, Anne became Queen of England and gave birth. And this was exactly the moment when everything began to go terribly wrong for her. In English history, no queen had ever been executed before. When Anne was arrested in May 1536, the court was in shock, but not because they believed she would die. No one thought Henry would actually go through with it. Yet he did. And only now, with modern medical science, might we begin to fully understand why. Anne had given birth to a daughter, the future Elizabeth I. Henry was disappointed, but that did not stop the couple from trying again. Anne quickly became pregnant once more, but the joy did not last long. For unclear reasons, she lost the pregnancy. To make matters worse, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting turned against her in the most cruel way possible. By late 1535, Henry had turned his attention to Jane Seymour. Jane is often seen as the opposite of Anne. Quiet and obedient, but this is not really true. She was far more clever and strategic than people usually think. Jane used the same technique Anne had once used on Henry herself. She would only accept the role of Queen of England, not that of a mistress. But it wasn't just a growing romance. It was a warning. Anne's safety now depended on one thing alone. After 3 years as queen, this was Anne's last real chance to produce a male heir. Luck seemed to be on her side again. She became pregnant once more, convinced this time it was a son. She wasn't wrong, but fate had a cruel twist in store, an injury that would change Henry's brain forever and alter the course of Tudor history. During a jousting tournament, the king suffered a catastrophic accident. His horse fell on top of him, crushing him beneath its weight. This was not a minor tumble. Surviving it at all was remarkable. Henry lay unconscious, and reports say he was out for up to 2 hours. Courtiers whispered that the king might be dead. When news reached Anne, who was still pregnant, the shock was unbearable. Some modern historians and medical researchers have suggested that Henry may have suffered a traumatic brain injury that day. This type of injury can damage the parts of the brain that control impulse, emotion, and empathy. Supporters of this theory point out that after 1536, Henry became more paranoid, ordered executions more readily, and showed less emotional attachment. Shortly after learning of Henry's accident, Anne suffered another devastating loss. She miscarried her savior. This time it really was a son. Anne begged the king for one last chance. But Henry, now more ruthless than ever, had had enough. He decided to do something that would become one of the greatest scandals of the 16th century. Anne was one of the most talked about women in Europe in her time. Among royal courts and political leaders, her name carried real weight. People hated her for several reasons. First, she influenced Henry to break with the Catholic Church, which shocked much of Europe. Second, she played a role in the humiliation and fall of Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, whose family included powerful rulers like Emperor Charles V. In the Holy Roman Empire, Anne was seen as a villain. In Rome, she was viewed as a symbol of immorality. In France, where she was shaped by figures such as Marguerite de Navarre, she was seen as educated and refined. We can only imagine the reactions of all those people when Anne was arrested and accused of adultery with several men, including her own brother. The charges included incest and high treason. Historians today believe these accusations were completely fabricated. The punishment was death by beheading. But until the very last moment, there was still hope for Anne. Many expected Henry was simply trying to frighten her, to teach her a lesson. Standing on the scaffold, Anne kept looking around, searching the crowd for the messenger who would announce the king's mercy. He never came. The executioner, a skilled swordsman brought specially from France, ended Anne's life with a single stroke. But this is not where her story ends. What happened to Anne's body after her execution left even historians speechless. Henry went to shocking lengths to erase Anne from history after her fall. That is why the portraits of her we see today are not real. They are copies of originals that Henry ordered to be destroyed. He tried to eliminate letters, records, and any memorials of Anne. His determination went so far that even the body of the woman he once loved became part of his campaign to rewrite the past. Normally, when a queen died in Tudor England, she would be buried with dignity, usually in a royal tomb or chapel, sometimes accompanied by a state funeral. Her memory would be publicly honored, and monuments or memorials might be erected. Anne's case, however, was very different. Henry went far beyond normal practice in how he treated her after her execution. It was all to give the message that Anne was no longer important. no longer royal and no longer worth public memory. When the sword fell, Anne's body was left on the scaffold. No coffin had been prepared. Henry gave no orders and issued no instructions regarding her burial. Anne had no funeral. Her ladies-in-waiting, who had supported her to the very end, were terrified and left to manage her body on their own. They wrapped her head in white cloth from her belongings, the only measure they could think of, and had to beg for something to bury her in. The solution was humiliating, but it was the only available option. A kind yeoman warder gave them an old elm chest from the armory that had been used to hold bows or arrows. Anne was placed in the chest and buried in the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula. 300 years later, her grave was opened, revealing that the treatment of her body after death had been far worse than anyone had imagined. Victorians were deeply fascinated by Tudor history, especially its tragic queens. Few figures captured their imagination more than Anne. Queen Victoria herself often mentioned Anne and expressed genuine admiration for her, seeing her not as a villain but as a wronged and complex woman. But here is what many people get completely wrong. Many claimed that Victoria was so obsessed with Anne that she ordered her grave to be opened and her body examined. The reason, however, was very different. The discovery of Anne's burial site was not planned. It occurred during restoration work, when workers had no choice but to lift the old floor. What they found beneath it was devastating. The executed victims of Henry's tyranny were lying next to one another, Anne's own brother, her cousin, and others. Scientists quickly identified the place where Anne should have been buried. What they found inside her head was difficult to explain. Dr. Frederick Moat described the skeleton as belonging to a woman of delicate frame of body and who had been of slender and perfect proportions. The remains were attributed to a female between 25 and 30 years old, standing between 5 feet and 5 feet 3 inches tall. The neck vertebrae were noted as particularly small. The skull, hands, and foot bones were carefully examined. Evidence of decapitation was consistent with her execution, but there was one detail that unsettled the investigators. Anne was missing several teeth. At first, this may seem insignificant, but a closer look makes it grim. Teeth can survive for centuries, even thousands of years, because their enamel is incredibly resistant to decay. Some of Anne's teeth were present, others were simply gone. The question is why? It is unlikely that Anne lost them during her lifetime, as such a flaw would have been noticeable and almost certainly recorded by her enemies, who were eager to exploit every imperfection. It is also unlikely that they decomposed. The theory behind what may have truly happened challenges everything we think we know about Anne's final moments and what followed them. To fully understand what may have happened to Anne, we must step back into the mindset of earlier centuries. In the era of Napoleon Bonaparte, it was common for admirers to keep and wear lockets containing strands of his hair as tokens of loyalty or devotion, especially after his death. Queen Victoria similarly preserved and wore hair from her husband, Prince Albert, as a deeply personal relic of mourning. After the Restoration, Oliver Cromwell's head was removed from his body and passed through private hands for centuries as a macabre relic before finally ending up in a museum. These examples show how human remains were perceived. They were believed to retain something of a person's genius, authority, or spirit. Owning a relic of a famous figure signified proximity to history and served as a private badge of importance. But this attitude had an even darker side. While grave robbing for souvenirs was never widespread, it persisted across Europe and was directed almost exclusively at the graves of the famous. Their remains were treated less as sacred dead and more as meaningful objects. Teeth, in particular, were small, durable, and easily taken, making them a likely choice for someone seeking a personal souvenir. The chapel where Anne was buried was rebuilt and altered many times over the centuries. There is no direct historical evidence that Anne's grave was robbed, but the possibility cannot be ignored. It is possible that someone removed Anne's teeth, either soon after her execution or centuries later, in order to sell them or keep them as personal objects. If so, it is impossible to know where they might be now, and identifying them would be nearly a miracle. But there are even more secrets surrounding Anne's teeth and other body parts. What passed for normal hygiene in her lifetime is horrifying by modern standards. Watch the next video to find out why.